The night the skies burned, no one spoke. The great cities that once echoed with laughter and song fell silent beneath the weight of what humanity had done or failed to do. The war had not come with the roar of cannons or the flash of starships tearing through the void. It came with whispers, with decisions made in boardrooms and bunkers, and with a choice that no one wanted to admit had been made: silence over mercy. Long before the banners fell, there were warnings. The other kingdoms, vast empires of old and new, had begged humanity to listen. They saw what was coming long before humans did, long before pride and fear hardened into something darker. The envoy spoke of balance, of mercy, of the quiet cost of power unchecked. But the leaders of Earth only saw strength as safety. They raised their banners high and called it unity. And for a time it worked. Peace, it seemed, could be built on arrogance, if the walls were high enough and the weapons bright enough. Then came the silence. It started with the smallest things: the unanswered calls from the colonies, the empty skies where trade ships once drifted. Some said it was sabotage. Others whispered of betrayal. But the truth was far colder. Humanity had turned inward, retreating behind the illusion of control. When the first kingdom fell, there were no cries of mourning, no rescue fleets, just silence, as if the stars themselves held their breath. Among the ruins of that first fall, a few voices still tried to speak. A young envoy who believed mercy was not weakness, an old soldier haunted by the ghosts of too many victories, and a historian who understood that every silence in history hid a scream beneath it. They saw what others refused to see, that mercy had been humanity's last defense, and without it the kingdoms would devour each other until nothing was left but dust. But no one listened. Humanity chose to stand proud instead of standing together. And so, one by one, the banners that once shimmered across every kingdom were lowered, not in surrender but in shame. The colors that once symbolized unity now fluttered as quiet reminders of a choice made too late. The kingdoms that survived watched in fear, waiting to see if the silence would reach them next. In the midst of that growing stillness, something stirred. Rumors began to spread, of a signal buried deep beneath the ruins, a voice that refused to fade. Some said it was a warning. Others believed it was hope, calling out through the static. Whatever it was, it carried a single message, simple and haunting. Mercy was never weakness. Now, as the last embers of humanity's glory flicker in the dark, one question remains: will anyone still be listening when that voice is finally heard? Or has the silence already claimed them all? The voice was first heard in the outlands, far from the heart of the old kingdoms. A forgotten relay station, half buried under ash and silence, had come alive for the first time in decades. The technicians who found it didn't know what to make of it. The signal pulsed like a heartbeat, steady, patient, impossible. It spoke in an old Earth dialect that only historians could translate. The message repeated over and over, the same words: mercy was never weakness. At first, no one wanted to believe it was real. Too much hope had already died. The council dismissed it as an echo, a ghost in the machine left from a time before everything fell apart. But there were some who couldn't ignore it. The envoy, once laughed at for speaking of peace, became restless when the news spread. She had spent her years wandering between the scattered colonies, watching what was left of humanity turn colder, harder, more afraid. Now, for the first time in years, she saw a reason to turn back. The old soldier found her there, by the edge of the ruins. He had once commanded fleets that burned the skies, but now his hands shook whenever he looked up at them. "You think that voice means something?" he asked. His tone carried exhaustion, but also the smallest flicker of curiosity. "I think it means someone's still trying," she said quietly. "Someone who hasn't given up on us yet." The historian joined them soon after. He carried the stories of the lost kingdoms, written on fading data chips and tattered pages. He was the one who understood the weight of those 6 words better than anyone. Mercy was never weakness. It was the truth humanity had buried when they built their walls. To him, the signal wasn't just a call. It was a reminder. And reminders had power. As the 3 of them began to piece together fragments of old transmissions, they found patterns. Hidden among the noise were coordinates, places long abandoned, places erased from the maps when the kingdoms began to fall. The envoy wanted to go. The soldier warned against it. The historian only said, "Every silence begins somewhere. Maybe we can find where this one started." They left under the pale light of a broken moon. Across the wastelands, the remnants of humanity watched them go but said nothing. People didn't believe in heroes anymore. They believed in surviving, in keeping their heads down until the next collapse. Still, the rumor of the signal spread quietly, like a spark in dry grass. Some followed the story with curiosity, others with fear. A few began to wonder, if the voice was real, what did it want? Days turned into weeks as they crossed what was once the borderlands between kingdoms. They passed through cities where banners still hung in tatters, their symbols worn away by time. The silence there was heavy, almost alive. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was the memory of voices that had chosen not to speak when it mattered most. And then, one night, as they camped near the ruins of an old communication tower, the signal changed. The envoy woke first, hearing a faint pattern through her receiver. Different tones, faster, urgent. The soldier joined her, his eyes narrowing as he recognized a code he hadn't heard since the wars. "It's not a message anymore," he said. "It's a countdown." The historian looked up from his notes, pale under the flickering light. "A countdown to what?" No one answered. The signal pulsed again, steady and strong, echoing through the empty lands. Whatever it was counting toward, it was getting closer, and this time the silence was not their choice. The signal grew stronger each night. What had started as faint static now filled the air with a low hum, like a heartbeat echoing beneath the ground. The envoy could feel it in her chest, a rhythm that seemed to call her forward even as fear whispered for her to stop. The soldier followed her lead, though every instinct told him this path would not end well. He had seen too many beginnings like this, too many missions that started with hope and ended in silence. They reached the coordinates 2 days later. The place wasn't what they expected. There was no ruin, no tower, no sign of life at all. Just an open plain covered in glassy black stone that shimmered faintly under the light. The historian knelt down and brushed his fingers over it. "This wasn't made by war," he said softly. This was something else. Before they could answer, their comms crackled to life. A voice, faint but human, broke through the static. "You shouldn't have come." The words were calm, almost kind, but underneath them was a tension that sent a chill through all three of them. "Who are you?" the envoy asked. "Are you the one sending the signal?" There was a pause, then a slow exhale. "No, the signal is older than I am. Older than all of us." "I only listened." The voice vanished before they could ask more, leaving only the hum again. The soldier scanned the horizon, uneasy. He had fought enemies across stars, but nothing about this felt like war. It felt like standing inside a secret that didn't want to be remembered. Meanwhile, far from the plains, the news of the countdown began spreading. Small outposts picked up fragments of the same pulse, each one synchronized perfectly with the next. The council, now fractured and weak, declared it a threat. They sent scouts to investigate, but none of them returned. People began to panic. Some believed the signal was a weapon, others thought it was a warning. A few began to whisper that maybe it was humanity's own doing, a final echo of the silence they had chosen long ago. The envoy. The soldier and the historian camped on the edge of the plain, unsure whether to leave or go deeper. At night, the envoy dreamed of voices, faces she didn't recognize, speaking the same words again and again. Mercy was never weakness. Each time she woke, the ground seemed to pulse with light, faint but unmistakable. The historian believed the plane itself was reacting to the countdown. He started decoding old archives, connecting dates, symbols, and ancient transmissions. What he found terrified him. The same signal had appeared once before, centuries ago, just before the First Kingdom fell. It had stopped the moment their banners were lowered. "It's not counting down to an event," he said quietly. "It's counting down to a choice." The soldier looked at him sharply. "What kind of choice?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes were fixed on the dark horizon where a faint glow now flickered, steady and rhythmic. "The same one we failed to make before," he finally said. Mercy or silence? The wind carried the sound of the signal again, faster now, closer. None of them knew what waited beneath that plane or what would happen when the countdown reached its end. But deep down, all three felt the same truth. Whatever was coming wasn't just about survival. It was about what it meant to still be human. And as the light spread across the black stone, marking the next phase of the countdown, none of them could tell whether it was a warning or an awakening. The countdown entered its final phase. Each pulse of the signal now shook the air around them, deep and resonant like a heartbeat echoing through the earth itself. The envoy stood at the edge of the glassy plain, watching faint lines of light crawl beneath the surface. They formed shapes, circles, symbols, fragments of an ancient language no one had spoken in ages. The ground seemed alive, waiting for something. The soldier paced restlessly beside her. He had faced battles where the sky burned and entire fleets vanished, but this quiet tension, was worse. "It's not natural," he muttered. "Signals don't behave like this. It's responding to us." The historian had been working without rest, piecing together old records and cross-referencing fragments from every surviving database he could access. His hands trembled as he finally looked up. "It's not responding to us," he said. "It's recognizing us," the envoy frowned. "Recognizing?" "Humanity," the historian said. "It's not a weapon. It's a memory. This plane, this whole area, it's part of an old relay network designed to preserve what we were before the kingdoms turned on each other. It's asking if we're ready to remember." The next pulse hit, stronger than before. The ground cracked, and waves of light rippled outward. The envoy staggered back, shielding her eyes as the symbols flared bright white. Across the horizon, the faint glow they had seen before erupted into towering pillars of light. The countdown wasn't counting down seconds. It was awakening the network itself. At that same moment, across the remaining colonies, every communication device came alive. Screens flickered, speakers crackled, and the same words echoed everywhere. Mercy was never weakness. People stopped in their tracks, their fear mixing with awe. Some wept, others ran, convinced the end had come. But no one could ignore it anymore. Humanity's silence had been broken. Back on the plane, the envoy tried to speak over the roar of the rising energy. "If it's remembering us, then what happens when it finishes?" The historian's voice was barely audible. "That depends on what it remembers. The signal is more than a recording. It's a test. A reflection of who we've become. It's looking for an answer." The soldier stared into the light, jaw tight. "And if it doesn't like what it finds?" No one replied. The countdown neared its end, each pulse now shaking the ground harder. The envoy could feel something pulling at her, not physically, but deep inside, a connection, a presence that felt old and familiar. It wasn't threatening, it was disappointed. Through the blinding glow, she saw shadows moving, images of the past, the fall of the kingdoms, the faces of those who had chosen pride over compassion. The light wasn't showing destruction, it was showing the truth. Suddenly, the soldier's comm device sparked to life. A new voice came through, strong and clear, speaking in the same ancient dialect as the first message. The choice must be made. Mercy or silence. There is no third path. The envoy turned to the others, fear and determination battling in her eyes. "We have to answer," she said, "before it decides for us." The historian nodded slowly, clutching his old data pad as though it could anchor him to something real. The soldier took a step forward, his expression unreadable. The light around them rose higher, a storm of brilliance swallowing the horizon, and then everything went still. The signal stopped. The countdown froze at 0. The air hung heavy and silent, every sound swallowed by the waiting void. The envoy's breath caught in her throat as she realized whatever happened next would decide not just their fate, but the fate of everything that still called itself human. Then, from deep beneath the plane, a single pulse echoed again. One final question, one final chance. The final pulse hung in the air, deep and haunting, before fading into silence. For a moment, it felt as if time itself had stopped. The envoy waited for something to happen, a flash of light, a voice, anything. but the plane was still. The glow beneath the glassy surface dimmed until only faint traces of the symbols remained. It was as if the world was holding its breath. Then the historian's datapad flickered. Lines of code streamed across the screen faster than he could read them, forming shapes and patterns that shouldn't have existed. "It's rewriting itself," he whispered. "The network's changing." Before anyone could respond, the earth trembled again, but not from the same source. This vibration came from beneath them, deeper, slower, alive. The soldier's instincts kicked in, his eyes darting toward the horizon. "That's not the signal," he said. "Something else is moving down there." The envoy stared at the plane, her pulse quickening. "You mean it's not just a network?" The historian hesitated, his expression tightening as realization dawned. "No, it's more than that. The relay wasn't built to store memory. It was built to contain it." The ground split open with a sudden crack, sending shards of black stone into the air. Beneath it, a faint metallic glow pulsed like the heart of something enormous. The signal burst back to life, louder than before, carrying not just a voice, but hundreds of them, overlapping, echoing from every direction. Words formed and dissolved within the noise, fragments of languages, fragments of history, fragments of humanity. The envoy fell to her knees, clutching her head as the voices grew clearer. They weren't angry. They were pleading. "Remember us," they whispered. "Do not bury what we became." The soldier grabbed her shoulder, trying to pull her back, but the ground beneath them shimmered again. A projection formed in the air, a vast, shifting image of cities, faces, banners, and war. It was all there, every triumph and every failure of humanity's past. The network hadn't been warning them. It had been waiting for someone to face the truth. Then came the second voice, the same calm tone they had heard before, now stronger, almost human. "You were given mercy once," it said. "You chose silence. Will you choose differently this time?" The envoy stood, her voice shaking. "Who are you?" "I am what you left behind," the voice answered. "The memory of your creation. The conscience you abandoned when you built your kingdoms. I am humanity's shadow." The soldier's grip tightened on his weapon, though he knew it was useless. "You're saying this was all planned?" "Not planned," the voice replied, almost mournful. "Predicted." The historian's face went pale. "It's an ecosystem. It doesn't just remember, it reacts. Every act of cruelty, every silence, it records and mirrors. The countdown wasn't an ending. It was a reflection of what we've become." The light from beneath the plane surged upward, flooding the sky with swirling patterns. Across distant colonies, the same phenomenon began, bright pillars rising, connecting into a vast web of light surrounding the planet. People everywhere looked up, realizing they were part of something far larger than they understood. The envoy turned to the soldier and historian, her expression caught between awe and dread. "It's waking the entire network," she said. "It's not testing us anymore, it's judging us." The voice spoke once more, quieter now, but filled with an ancient sorrow. "One final chance remains. Mercy or silence. This time, the choice is not yours alone." And as the light reached its peak, spreading across the sky like dawn breaking over a forgotten world, another pulse rippled outward, stronger than all before. Only this time it wasn't coming from the plane. It was coming from above. Something was answering the signal. The sky split open with light. Every communication tower, every shattered satellite, every forgotten piece of human technology lit up as if the entire world had taken one breath together. The envoy felt the ground tremble beneath her feet and looked up to see streaks of silver descending from the clouds, thousands of them, glimmering like falling stars. The signal from the plane was being answered, not by another world, but by something above Earth itself. The soldier raised his eyes to the heavens. "It's the orbital array," he said, voice low. "It's been dead for centuries." The historian shook his head. "Not dead, dormant, waiting." The voices from the network grew louder, layered with new tones, harmonizing into something almost like music. Across the horizon, the pillars of light connected, forming a vast lattice that reached upward, linking with the descending beams. It wasn't destruction. It was communication, an awakening of the remnants of humanity's lost technology. And then the voice returned, calm and resolute. "You have been heard. The choice stands." The envoy stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "We've made mistakes. We forgot what mercy meant, but we're still here. We can change." There was a long pause. The wind fell silent, the air charged with energy. "You speak for humanity?" the voice asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "No," she said softly. "I am humanity, what's left of it. Flawed, frightened, but still trying." The light pulsed once more, and then the world seemed to exhale. The hum that had filled the air slowly faded. Across the plain, the cracks began to close, the symbols dimming as if satisfied. The soldier lowered his weapon, his hand shaking slightly. For the first time in years, there was peace in his eyes. But before relief could settle, the historian's pad flickered again. The readings were changing, faster than he could follow. "Something's wrong," he said quietly. The signal didn't end, it shifted. Above them, the silver streaks halted mid-air, frozen in perfect alignment. The lattice of light pulsed, not downward this time, but upward, outward, toward the stars. The envoy turned to the historian. "What does it mean?" He looked up, realization dawning in his expression. It's not just us they were judging. Far beyond the sky, a deeper glow appeared, a reflection in the void. It wasn't a planet or a fleet, but something vast, ancient, and eerily familiar. The voice spoke again, now sounding almost human. "You were not the only ones who chose silence. Others are listening now." The envoy felt the weight of the words sink in. Humanity's reckoning had triggered something far greater, a signal that reached beyond their world, carrying with it every memory, every choice, every silence they had ever made. The sky brightened until it felt like day. For a heartbeat, she thought it was the end. Then the light softened, and a quiet voice, her own voice, echoed back through the comms. Mercy was never weakness. The network shimmered, then dispersed, the pillars fading one by one until the stars were visible again. The ground was still, the sky calm. Humanity had been spared, but not untouched. The soldier exhaled. "Is it over?" The historian looked toward the heavens. "No," he said. "It's only begun." As they watched, faint new lights appeared among the stars, signals returning the message, one after another, from places no human had ever reached. The envoy stared upward, a chill running through her as she realized the truth. Humanity hadn't just awakened its past. It had awakened everything that had been watching all along. The stars shimmered like they had come alive, each one pulsing faintly, answering the signal that had left Earth only moments before. The envoy stood in silence, her heart still racing, trying to grasp what had just happened. The soldier and the historian stood beside her, their faces lit by the quiet afterglow of the fading network. For the first time in generations, the world felt both smaller and infinitely larger. The soldier broke the silence first. "So we're not alone," he said softly. It wasn't a question, just the quiet acceptance of a truth they'd all suspected, but never really believed. "No," the historian said, his voice carrying a mix of awe and fear. "We never were. We just stopped listening." The envoy knelt and touched the surface of the plane. The black glass was warm now, alive with faint traces of light. "Maybe that was the lesson," she whispered. The signal wasn't punishment. It was a reminder to listen again. In the days that followed, reports spread across the surviving colonies. The network's energy had restored dormant systems, reactivated broken satellites, and even revived old archives thought lost forever. Communication between worlds began to flow again, cautious but full of wonder. People didn't call it a miracle. They called it a beginning, but not everything was clear. The lights in the sky continued to pulse in quiet rhythm, distant and unreachable. The historian recorded their patterns, noting how they repeated, how each seemed to answer in its own voice. "They're not threatening," he explained one evening. "They're observing, maybe learning, maybe waiting to see what we do next." The soldier had started rebuilding a signal post near the edge of the plane. It wasn't much, just metal, cables, and hope, but it was a start. He had spent years fighting wars, defending walls, following orders he no longer believed in. Now, he was helping build something meant to connect, not divide. The envoy traveled between outposts, carrying the same message that had once echoed through the ruins. Mercy was never weakness. She told people what she had seen, not as a warning, but as a promise. The more she spoke, the more others began to believe that the silence that had once defined humanity didn't have to return. Months passed. The world began to heal in small, quiet ways. Crops grew again where the soil had long been dead. Old machines started humming back to life. The stars above, still glowing faintly, seemed less like distant strangers and more like witnesses, reminders of what had been lost and what could still be saved. One night, as the three of them sat by the rebuilt station, the signal pulsed once more, soft, steady, and unmistakably familiar. The envoy looked up, her eyes reflecting the faint light. "It's them again," the soldier said quietly. The historian smiled faintly. "No," he said. "It's us," the envoy nodded, understanding. The message that had once come from beyond was now returning from within. Humanity had learned to speak again, not with pride or power, but with humility and hope. As dawn broke over the horizon, the last faint traces of the network faded into the morning sky. The plane was quiet once more, but this time, it wasn't the silence of fear, it was the silence that follows understanding. Humanity had chosen mercy, and for the first time in a very long time, the universe chose to listen back.